Hello, my name is James Bell and this is Album 101. Well, hello and welcome everyone to my studio, and I'm back for another album review and I can't wait, it's been some time. I say that every time, but I'm glad I finally got a chance to do my next album review. And what is it today, you ask? Well, it is the debut album from Nik Kershaw. This is Human Racing and this was released in 1984. So this album reached number 5 in the UK charts. And I'm going to start with the packaging. Now on the front cover, of course, we have Nik Kershaw's picture. And I like the muted colour palette, it's quite nice, and the red really stands out at the top there. On the back, we've got a big window and a sort of electric heater plugged in, but the plug is sparking. And yeah, there's sort of black wall, and we've got all the credits here. And it also says, this album was produced by the legendary Peter Collins for Loose End Productions and recorded by a small Australian called Julian D. Mendelsohn at Psalm East, Psalm West and Marcus Music. It was mixed at Psalm East. He was assisted by Stuart Bruce, Ken Finney, Bob Crowsar, Roger Howarth and Nick Camby. Horns recorded by Bruce Robb at Cherokee Studios, Los Angeles. And yeah, and the photography was by Ian McKell. So this was a really successful period for Nik Kershaw. He spent 62 weeks in the UK album charts between 1984, well, the singles charts, I should say, between 1984 and 1985. And this debut album was released in 1984. And it was produced by Peter Collins and mixed by Julian Mendelsohn. And yeah, what I love about this album is just it's got a really good mix of synthesizers and acoustic and electric guitar and like acoustic drum kit with drum machines. And I first came across Nik Kershaw on BBC Radio 2. I remember just hearing The Riddle, one of his later singles, and yeah, I just had to find out more about him, and then I've really got into his music, and yeah, I think he's a great musician, and I just love this album. I think it's really fab. And so this album starts with a really high energy number, Dancing Girls, and it kind of, you know, personifies that sound of the 1980s with that drum machine, and it's, you know, it's got that energy to it that really persists through it, and with that kind of arpeggiated sort of synth, it kind of has a repeating motif. And yeah, it's sort of about a guy wanting a kind of escapism, really. I've got the lyrics here on the thing, on the dust cover, on the sleeve. Cold, lonely, tired and bored, just like the day before. Missing out on life's reward, on that you can be sure. So bring on the dancing girls. Take off the cold night and the sad day. Bring on the dancing girls. Take off the twilight and the sky so grey. And they dance for him inside his head. And this was released as a single as well, and the pop video for this is quite interesting because it shows sort of lots of 1930s semi-detached houses, sort of that kind of suburban kind of area, 1930s area. You'll know what I mean if you live in Britain. And it's funny because you have all these characters just dance unexpectedly, and it's meant to be within Nik Kershaw's head because he's sort of kind of bored in these sort of normal scenarios. So it's a very interesting one. It also features a ballerina too. It's very interesting to contrast that. It's very interesting to contrast that first opening track, Bring On The Dancing Girls, with the next track, Wouldn't It Be Good? Because Wouldn't It Be Good has got more of a kind of organic sound with those electric guitars and the acoustic drum kit. And but there's still synthesizers in there. There's a mixture of Yamaha DX7 synths and PPG wave synths. I think it was 2.2 the model. And they can also be used for sampling, a little bit like the Fairlight CMI, which I'll get onto a little bit later in the video. But yeah, it's got a very full sound, and it's also got some brass sounds. And I was like, is that actual real brass instruments or is it synthetic? But they are real. And but yeah, it's got a very full sound to the production, but it still manages to keep that atmosphere. It's got a real atmosphere about the song I really like. And the music video is also interesting because Nik Kershaw is wearing a kind of white suit, but what they've done, it's sort of, they've used keying effects, and keying effects is where you take one colour and you can replace it with any other image or video. So what they've done is they've overlaid different images onto and videos onto this white suit that Nik Kershaw's wearing, and I think he's meant to be an alien, and he's sort of jealous of other people because he can't fit in or something. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, it's an interesting video, and I think the keying effects, particularly for that time, are very effective. My favourite track on the album has to be Drum Talk. It's, you know, if you thought, you know, Bringing the Dancing Girls brought a lot of energy, this just takes it to the next level. I mean, so fast-paced, high energy, and all those vocal samples are just incredible. And so they would have either used the PPG wave synth, because it had a capability of where you linked it up to other hardware, you could then use it for sampling, or they could have used the Fairlight CMI, I'm not quite sure which one they used. But yeah, the production on the whole thing feels so tight, and yeah, it's just so incredible. And I think, you know, so much hard work has been put into making all of these different vocal samples work. And there's another track later on which I'll talk about, which again uses a similar technique. But yeah, it works very, very well, and this is a track that is based around improvisation. But it's got some good lyrics. Whenever I want some company, whenever I need a song to play, whenever my love is sitting by me, and when I can't find the words to say, I let the drums do the talking. Bogart's a very interesting track, both lyrically and musically. I love the opening sound that reminds me of a ship bell. It's very interesting. And then we have that opening synth melody, which is very folky. It feels very, very folky. But it's nicely balanced when you go into the verses and choruses. It sounds a bit more rocky, a bit more poppy. But what really sells the song for me are the lyrics, and like it suggests, it's about the actor Humphrey Bogart. Now keep this to yourself, but my love plays games with me. I don't mean gin or Monopoly. Strings me along like some pet animal or other. Why do I play her game when when she can't even remember my name? Wish I could whistle like Big Sleep's famous lover. Hey there, Bogart, could you help me out? Talk to me, Bogart, what it's all about. And so, yeah, it's very interesting. And it's sort of focusing on different Hollywood actors, it seems here. In the second verse, it seems to talk about, it could be Chuck Norris. I have to tell you about Chuck. He's indestructible. Well, he's 6 1/2 feet tall. And he's witty and pretty and all-American, I'm afraid. She thinks that he's so smart. She doesn't know that she's breaking my heart. Wish I could wrestle like Hollywood's favourite renegade. So yeah, I could be talking about Chuck Norris because he was in a lot of action films at that time, but I'm not quite sure. But what is also very poignant about this song is that it has a famous film quote at the end from Lauren Bacall, who was in the 1944 film To Have and Have Not. And she starred in that with Humphrey Bogart, and she actually says this quote to Humphrey's character towards the end. And both those actors did actually marry a year later in 1945, and they were married for 12 years. And Humphrey Bogart sadly died in 1957. And in the album, this quote is actually read by Linda Hayes. But it's, if you want me, just whistle. You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow. And yeah, I think it's a great quote to have. To finish off side one, we have Gone to Pieces. And what impresses me about this song is its use of vari speed and the different speeded up vocals, but it's in time to the music. So Nik Kershaw has obviously recorded some of these parts slower and at a lower pitch, and then they've speeded it up so it's at the right pitch, for the right key for the track. And yeah, it's very clever. And I also loved, before going into the chorus of Gone to Pieces, with the lyrics, "I'm not here, I'm somewhere else, and I'm not coming back." You have this sort of robotic synth sound, and I think it's very effective. And yeah, I think, it's in these lyrics, he's just completely fed up. I think I'll call the whole thing off. A joke's a joke, it's not funny anymore. Enough's enough. Now I forget what I was fighting for. I played the game, I lost. I even took the blame, I lost. I'll change my name to Lost. And I'll never be the same anymore. So tell the world I'm not here, I'm someone else. And I'm not coming back. On to side two now, and we start with Shame on You. And like drum talk, it's got an amazing use of vocal sampling. And it reminds me, I always think of the remix of Higher Love by Whitney Houston, because it's got that kind of energy to it with those vocal samples. And it's so memorable. And I think this was just such great production for 1980, so really took advantage of the technology they had, because this would have been so much harder 10 years before in the 70s. And with digital sampling coming about, they were able to really create these great production values and use these great vocal samples. But what lyrically as well, it's also very interesting because it kind of teases the whole kind of, I love you, I will go to the ends of the world for you. And so it goes, I would catch the breeze from the trees and the stars from up above. I would go around the world on my knees for you. So you think, oh yeah, it's a lovely romantic song, but then it goes, shame on you, shame on you. Oh, what does a boy have to do for you? Shame on you, shame on you. Oh, what does a boy have to do? And so yeah, it really plays on that whole kind of, oh, I'll go to the ends of the world for you. I think it's great. Cloak and Dagger has some very kind of poetic lyrics. I quite like them. But as well, I also really like, and with all of these songs production-wise, is that the electric guitar is like fire against those synths, because the synths feel very cold, and especially when they've got these repeating motifs, they've got a kind of they have got a very cold feel to them. And then when you hear the electric guitar, it just adds that kind of fire and punch to the mix. So they work really well against each other. And I want to read the first verse. You may never get to wander along the corridors of power, where the files tell your story. Beneath the bell, it keeps it secret by the hour. We want to know what it's got to say. And everything so cloak and dagger, our future in their hands. Promises of promised lands, cloak and dagger, our world behind closed doors. And what they have is mine and yours. So yeah, I think Nik Kershaw writes some very interesting, very poetic lyrics, they feel very political. And that's the theme that comes again and again. I really like the track Faces. I think it's got a really interesting, distinctive sound. And it opens with a sort of diegetic opening. It's got the sound of something dropping. And we get these interesting percussive sounds all the way through. And they might have been sounds fed through a digital sampler and then deployed that way. I'm not quite sure. But we've got these sort of airy pad synths, the sort of space sounds, and that suits it really well, because the first line in the lyrics is, they found me lost in space, nowhere to go. With the stakes so high and my resistance so low, they said, follow us today. We are the truth, we are the way. So again, it feels, the lyrics in this feel very political. But what becomes very apparent in the chorus is this modal key. And I really like modal keys because they're not major and they're not minor. They're somewhere in the middle, and they usually feel very folky. And it becomes apparent in the chorus, which reads, one for us and one for you, one for old and one for new, one for rich and one for poor, one for peace and one for war. And it's got a really lovely, this track has got really nice production values. And it's also got like a long reverb on the words war at the end of that first chorus. And in the building towards the climax, he then sings it with a choir, which is really nice. But yeah, it's similar, I guess, to The Riddle in the sense that it is that modal key. The Riddle was a later single from Nik Kershaw, and it was also the title track to his second album. But it's also similar to another track that Julian Mendelssohn worked on, Tamsin Archer's Sleeping Satellite, which I absolutely love. I think it's such a great song. But again, that has got, that's in a modal key, and it's got a very folky feel to it. The penultimate song on the album is I Won't Let the Sun Go Down. And this is interesting because this was released twice as a single. So it was first released in 1983, where it didn't do so well. It got to number 47 in the singles charts. And then they re-released it a year later after they released some of the other songs from this album as singles. And it did a lot better, and it got to number 2. So I think it's very interesting. It shows that timing is everything when it comes to things like singles and things. It's not always clear-cut how well a track will do. But it's got a very optimistic sound. It feels the most optimistic sounding, I think, out of all the tracks. And again, it's very electric guitar based. So some of the tracks feel like they have the synth as a backing and the electric guitar on the top. But in this one, the electric guitar is underneath and it's got the synths on top. And the synth solos are done on an Oberheim OB8. And it's got a more warmer sound because it's an analog synth rather than a digital synth like a DX7. And but you know, even though it sounds optimistic, it's got, you know, underlying politics in the lyrics. You know, you've got old men in stripy trousers rule the world with plastic smiles. Good or bad, like it or not, it's the only one we've got. And yeah, with the sort of reoccurring chorus, I won't let the sun go down on me, you kind of can forget that you've got those underlying political lyrics in there in the verses. But yeah, I think it works really well. What's also interesting, along with those two single releases, is that there was 2 different videos released. So the first one was very medieval themed. They filmed it in a castle, and they have like a minstrel and different things. And yeah, it feels very, it feels like it's got a concept to it. And the second video of I Won't Let the Sun Go Down is more of a live recording, but it's interspersed with these videos of these men in the stripy suits. And they seem to come backstage, I think, in the video. But obviously that was done. That wasn't done live as with the live footage of the gig. So yeah, 2 very different videos, but they both work. The final song on this album is the title track, Human Racing. And it's very interesting because there's a lot of focus on the lyrics here because it feels so intimate. There's the repeating drum machine rhythm, and that's very memorable. And it's sort of punctuated by these really nice, light, chimey synthesizers, which I think work really well. It gives it some light in there. And I think the build up and fade out in this track works really well too. But I'm going to read the lyrics. Closing in on empty spaces, winners laugh too soon. A paper world with paper faces beneath a paper moon. There's a man, a real pace setter, coming after me, and after him there's someone better, and after him there's me. And yeah, it's really interesting, and they sort of try to draw on those kind of the lyrics in the video, where they actually use a lot of computer animation, which is really interesting. A lot of early computer animation, and they also show a scene of prison inmates playing a board game. I'm not quite sure which board game it is, but they're playing a board game, as well as Nik Kershaw running along corridors and sitting in a seat surrounded by all these monitors. So that's very interesting. But what's really interesting about this track was that Nik Kershaw actually released this track with a band he was in the early 1980s called Fusion. But back then it was called Look Behind You. And Look Behind You is actually in the lyrics of the chorus. So look behind you, there's the man you're chasing. Look behind you, let's go human racing. And so it's interesting how they decided to rename the track to Human Racing from Look Behind You. That original track I've listened to, and it is interesting because the drum machine rhythm is incredibly similar, but I do feel like they polished in this version on Nik Kershaw's debut album. They polished it more and put some more thought into more synths in there and different things. So even though they're quite similar, this version of the song is just a little bit more polished, I feel. But yeah, I always find it really interesting hearing earlier versions of tracks, and you can see how they've developed and grown over time. So I really appreciate that in this song. So to conclude about Nik Kershaw's Human Racing, I really like this album because it has some really poetic lyrics. It has some real thought about what he wanted to write about, and they have a lot of depth to them. But production wise as well, I feel like they did a really good job. Nick Julian and Peter Collins did a really good job in thinking about how to best take advantage of what they had at the time in terms of synthesizers and digital samplers, and how to really take advantage of all the technology they had at that time. And I think it sounds some of it sounds very 80s. It sounds very typical of 80s production styles, but some of it still sounds so innovative, because when you hear things like Shame on You and all the vocal samples in that, and in drum talk as well, I mean, that still sounds so fresh even today. So I really like that, but I think it just works so well, all the mixes with those bright synths and the electric guitars, they managed to make it very cohesive. So I think it works really well because it works really well in terms of mainstream, but also I get a lot out of it production wise and lyrically as well. So yeah, I really like this album, Human Racing. So that was my review for Nik Kershaw's Human Racing. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Is this your favourite Nik Kershaw album, or do you prefer a later one? And what do you think of the production on this album? Because I absolutely love the production. And yes, and let me know what other albums you'd like me to review in the future. And also, I should mention now as well that I've been given a new slot on Radio Tyneside for Curtain Up. I'm now on from 10 PM till midnight on a Sunday for Curtain Up. So I'm on for 2 hours. So I have my theme for Act 1 for the first hour, and then my theme for Act 2. So please tune in. You can tune in on the Radio Tyneside website, or if you live in Newcastle and Gateshead, you can listen in on FM on 93.6. So I'll be doing that again on this Sunday. But until next time here on my YouTube channel, I will see you all again very soon. Bye everyone. Oh, Tina. She's rolling on the ground wanting a fuss. Oh. She loves sunning herself. Look at her. Oh, I can't resist. I'm going to give her a fuss. Yes. Hello. Yes. Don't forget to subscribe to James Bell's YouTube channel